All right, so let's talk about how to make some realistic eyes. Now in my scene now, I just have my elf character, and I have a default physical sun and sky set up. So when I render it, that's what it looks like. And in my camera, I have a bookmark for my camera. So under camera bookmarks, if you go to edit bookmarks, you can just go new bookmark. And then as I revolve around my scene, I can then just go to view bookmarks and select my bookmark, and I snap back to that position. So when it comes to eyes, to make them really kind of semi-realistic, you have to kind of treat them like an actual eye rather than just putting a texture on a sphere. You have to do some things to them to make them sort of react with light physically the way an actual eye does. So if we look at a diagram of an eye, we have the sclera, which is the white part, the cornea, which is attached to the sclera, and then we have the iris and the pupil. And basically, when we see the black of a pupil, what we're seeing is just blackness, because that lens, we're seeing that lens in the opposite direction. So I would kind of compare this to looking at a window, looking through a window at night. So if you're outside of the house, you know, where the light is, you can see inside. So if we were inside the eyeball, we would be able to see the light inside of that house. But if you're inside the house, you're where that light is. So we're standing outside here, we're in the light. When we're looking out the window, it's just black. So basically that's why our pupils are black, because we're just seeing into darkness and we're not seeing into light. So when it comes to modeling this, I'm just going to really model the cornea, the sclera, and the iris, and the pupil will just be blackness. So jumping back into Maya, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hide my character so I have those eyes there. His pants are there as well, so I'm going to add that to that layer. And we'll just start with a sphere. I'm going to bring that up and put that into, try to get that into the same position as one of his other eyes. His eyes are quite a bit bigger than a natural human eye, so I want to be mindful of that. I just want to get that sized pretty correctly and placed correctly. And I'm just going to, for now, I'm just going to delete that other eye. We'll leave that one there for now. We'll copy it over later, but for now I'm just going to leave that there. And then I'm going to rotate it on X 90 degrees. And then I want to model the cornea. The cornea is actually what kind of protrudes out. So if I go back and look at that image, you'll see that the cornea protrudes out a little bit. So in order to do that, I want to turn my model back on real quick. And it's important to do this with your model, especially if you have a stylized model like I do, because the placement of your iris is going to be very important to the attitude or temperament of the character you have. So I'm going to jump back in and so that's actually about where I want it. It's a little, I'm going to have to rotate it out a little bit after I'm done, but that's pretty much about where I want the iris. So I'm just going to go in and make a edge ring here, or edge loop. And then I'm going to grab these guys and pull them out a little bit. And I'll grab that guy and pull it out a little bit. grab that center point. Maybe have a look at that smooth. I think that looks good. And maybe have one more edge loop in here to give that kind of a sharp curve. So something like that. So there's the eye. That's probably a bit large. So I'm going to back up a little bit and maybe rethink that. Maybe I want to make that edge loop on the inside. What I can do is just select all of those edge rings, move it up a little bit, and then control double click to deselect the edge ring, move that one up. And then select that center point there. So that's a little bit better. So I'll hide the character again. And let's see. So what is our next step going to be? Well, the next thing I want to do is kind of make this more like, give this a difference between the sclera, which is the white part, and the cornea, which is the this protruding part, which is clear. So the sclera is white, cornea is clear. So what I want to do is add a texture to this, or add a material. So I'm going to add just a blend. We'll just do this with a blend. You can do this with any material, even a Mila material, but just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to do this with a blend. So let's make the color white, like the sclera. And in transparency, I want to plug in a ramp. And so we have the black is going to be transparent. I'm sorry, it's the opposite. So black's going to be opaque here, it looks like. And then the white will be transparent. So I want the right to the edge of that to be opaque. And I think actually it's the other way around. So let's actually flip that around. No, maybe not. Yeah, I think that's actually what we want there. So we can see through the center. So yeah, something like that. If we render that, just do a quick render of that, it's going to look kind of weird at the moment. But you know, it's very reflective, like the cornea and the sclera is. I could probably jump in here and I can increase reflectivity a little bit, but for the most part, that's what I want here. Maybe have this. Let's actually turn on just so we can see this. Let's do an IPR. And jump over to that ramp material and try to get an idea. Because there is going to be a little bit of a gradient there. It's not going to be a super it's not going to be a very hard edge. So something like that. We just want it to right on the edge of the cornea. Okay. So for the next part, I'm actually going to make a separate object here, and I'm going to make a torus. Let's go down here, bring that up to where our eye is. And this is why I didn't want to rotate the eye right off the bat, because I want it to be straight so I can put this in the right position. So as far as the torus goes, let's look at some of the creation points here. Let's see. Radius. Section radius. So basically the center of this is going to be our iris. Let's go ahead and rotate this along X 90 degrees and kind of put this in position to where we can get an idea of how big we want this thing. So I definitely want the radius to go way down. So maybe something along the lines of that. That actually looks pretty close to what I need. Might actually drop the section radius down to maybe 0.1 or 0.25, 0.2. 0.22, yeah, so 0.22, something like that. So then I'm going to take this guy and I'm going to scale it in. I'm actually going to drop the number of subdivision heights down pretty low. So I think 9 might work pretty good. And then I'm just going to scale this guy down. I'm going to take the center. Let's have a look at this in our front view. Take these center vertices. And I'm going to move them in quite a bit like that. Make it a little bit more realistic. So whenever I smooth it, I should get a shape. Something like that. So let's put that in just under the eye there. And let's go ahead and actually let's pull that out real quick. Let's go ahead and add a new material to this. I will add another blend. And we will just give this a color like green, a very desaturated green like green eyes would be. And then we'll put this inside that eye. Okay, so let me go ahead and jump back to my bookmark. And we will turn our character back on. We will give that a render. All right, so a few things right off the bat. I think our eye is a little maybe too specular. So we'll have to fix that. But just to just kind of get an idea of what this looks like close up, let's zoom in here and re-render real quick. Okay, so yeah, way too specular, way too shiny. So let's do an IPR and tweak our settings a little bit on our material. So let's see, maybe we can drop the specular color way down. Once we do that, we'll still get the reflectivity, but we won't get that specular highlight, which is basically what we want. And then I'm noticing that I'm seeing the edge of that iris, and I don't really want to see the edge of that iris, so I need to select that and scale it up a little bit until I can just barely see the edge of that. So that looks a lot better. So now I need to actually make this look a little bit more like an eyeball. So I want you to notice here that we're seeing this nice realistic eye reflection because we're seeing the reflection on the cornea, and we're also seeing the reflection on the iris. So that's nice. That's what we want to see, and that's why we make them two separate objects. So for color, I have a texture that I made, and I just made this texture. Let's see, I actually still have it up in Photoshop. So I just made this texture by finding a picture of an eyeball, a close-up of an eye, and just editing it to get all the reflections out, adding a color in the background, and so on. So not anything really complicated. I have a few duplicated copies back here that are blurry to kind of give it a blurry edge. But otherwise, I just took a picture of an eyeball, or an eye, an actual human eye, and I just edited it to just have the iris, because that's all I really need. So before we do that in Maya, before we apply that texture to it, let's make sure our UVs are correct for our torus. So let's see, I have my torus selected. So what I want to do is a planar map. And it's going to look a little bit crazy. So I'm going to zero out my rotates, and I want to make sure these two values are the same. So usually you want to go with a larger number. So 126.4, we'll make that 126 point. Actually, we'll just make that 1.3. And we'll make this 1.3. So that makes it pretty symmetrical like that. So that's all I really need, a planar map like that. And let's go ahead and select both of those guys and go to delete history, and let's freeze our modify freeze transformations. So now let's select, and I'm selecting that's on the inside, so it's kind of hard to select. So what I'm doing is I'm selecting the outside of the eye, and I'm holding down Shift and dragging, and that will select the inside. So from here we can apply our texture. So go to File. I'm going to turn off my filter for now, and source images. And I'm not even sure what I named it. It's probably that one. Yeah. So open. That applies that. And see, is IPR still open? Yeah, IPR still open. So that looks pretty good. It's a little highlighted, little washed out there. So probably what I want to do for my iris as well is come to specular color and really drop down the specular color. And that will make it quite a bit more apparent. Okay, so the other thing I want to do is I want to give this, the inside of your iris, I want to give that a little bit of texture. So I'm going to add a bump map to that. And I'm actually going to just use the same texture that I have as the bump map, but I'm going to use one of the channels for that. So come over to bump mapping and we'll click that and click file. And that'll make a bump value node for us. And actually, I'm going to undo that. I have an easier way to show you. So I'm just going to undo that. And we'll go and manually do a bump 2D node. And let's jump over to our hypershade. And I already have that material selected, so I can just click that to graph the inputs and outputs. Let's select that one and graph those. And let's have a look at what we have here. So untitled to PNG, obviously I should have named that better to iris texture, something like that. I don't know. But what I want to do here is take my blue channel for my texture and I want to plug that into the bump value. And that should give us a bumpy result. So if I jump over to our material again and look at, oh, that didn't work. Let's see. Okay, so that did work. That is plugged in correctly. So if I select the bump node, trying to get this to where you can see it a little bit better. And we do a bump depth of 0. See that it's relatively flat. And if we do a 1, see that we have a little bit more bump detail there. It might be more apparent if we take our specular color back up a little bit. And you can try plugging in different channels. So we did the blue channel. We could try the green channel, see what the green channel looks like. Because it's basically, your bump is just the value. So actually the green channel actually looks really nice. So I think I'm going to keep it with the green channel. So 0. It's all relatively flat, and then 1. So yeah, green channel looks pretty good. So I have that. And just for the sake of experimentation, let me, I'll close this real quick. Let's zoom out. And I want to grab my directional light, which is the light for my physical sun and sky that I made. That's kind of pointed at a weird angle where it's straight into the eyes. Let's make it more of like a noon angle, so straight down. Maybe that'll give us a little bit of a better idea of what we're looking at here. So yeah, that's a much nicer look. And I can go into my blend here and I notice that my gradient there is kind of, could use a little bit more of a sharper edge. Also might want to go in here and choose interpolation to smooth my work a little bit better. So something like that looks okay. Okay, so now we have to deal with our sclera. So your sclera has kind of like a veiny look to it, and contrary to what you think, it's not always perfectly white. It's kind of like a little bit of an off-white. So let's jump over to the material for that and look at the color for that. So for the color for that, I'm going to plug in another ramp. It's going to look crazy because it's going to be a, no, it's a, I figured it'd be a rainbow ramp, but it's a black and white ramp. So I'll start by just getting rid of that guy. And let's make this more of an off-white with a slightly pinkish tint. So something like that looks good. Okay, so now we need to add like that little bit of veininess. Now you could plug in a texture to this. I'm kind of doing this the easy way. You know, this isn't going to be a super detailed character. The camera's never going to zoom up on his eye, so I don't need to be able to see the individual veins of the eye. So this may be important to you if you want to do a super realistic eye, if you're really going to get really close to the eye, but I'm not going to do that. So having those individual veins in there aren't that important to me. So what I want to do is just make sure I have in my color swatches, I want to make sure that I have that color set in there. And for my other color here, I'm going to select that and with this other color, and I'm going to go to selected color and come over here, and I want to plug in a fractal. It's going to get really crazy right off the bat. Actually, yeah, let's see, fractal, is that what I want? Maybe a fractal isn't what I want, so let's undo that. Let's try, let's go to 2D textures. Let's see, I could do a noise. Actually, let's try a fractal. Let's see what we get with a fractal. was hoping to get where I could plug in 2 colors, but it doesn't seem like that's giving me the option. So maybe we should try a noise. Let's see what a noise gives us. I sort of like the effect of the noise, but it's not really giving us what we want. So let's try something else. I think marble's the one that I want to go, and that's actually a 3D texture. Or a solid fractal, or, well, also let's try marble. And yeah, so marble gives us this cool kind of veiny look. So we can go to our filler color and we can add in our eyeball color there. We can play around with our settings here. Let's see. So that's looking okay. I think for ripples, what we want more of them in the Y direction. So X, Y, Z. So let's try 2 and Y. 4. So something like that's not too bad. So now I just need to come in and start playing with our ramp that controls that. So here is our veins here, and here's our white. So the further down we bring this, further up we bring that, the more our veins are going to kind of fade into our white. So this is one of those things where having your character on may really help here. And in this case, I'll have to redo our IPR because our character is back in our scene. Probably restart our window here because it doesn't seem to want to kick in. That our character is now visible. Do a render, see what happens. Yeah, okay. So now let's try IPR. Just doesn't seem to want to show those. So IPR, nope. IPR. Let's see if that will work with the character. Yeah. So it may help at this point to actually have your character in view so you can judge where the veins are actually coming to. Because whenever you see the whole eyeball, especially if you have a stylized character like I do, whenever you see the whole eyeball, it's kind of difficult to know where the vein should begin and end. So I'm going to bring this all the way up, and I'll bring these guys all the way up. It's not too bad. I probably want to mess around with those settings a little bit more. Actually, let me jump back real quick. And bring that in just a little bit further. Let me play around the settings for my fractal, or my, what was this, marble. This is my marble texture. A little bit. So yeah, something like that starting to look okay. I could probably drop that to 3, my ripples. And let's go back and adjust our material, our ramp. So that one is our marble. It's just lighter now because of the adjustments we made. But as I bring that closer, it's going to start to fade. So something like that is good. So from here, what I would want to do is, let's jump back to our 3D view. Let me turn off my lights here just so we can see what's going on. I want to group these guys together. So I want to group my, oops. I could also do a mesh combine. But if you want to control the pupil at all, you could always keep that separate, and then you can make some sort of controller where you can increase or decrease that, and that will increase or decrease the size of the pupil. But for for our sake, I'm just going to grab these guys and do a Control G to add them to a group. And I will go ahead and get rid of that guy. And I'm going to select our whole group, and we will do a edit, duplicate, special. We'll make a copy. Yeah, we'll make a copy. For rigging purposes, we don't want these to be instances. So we're going to make a copy. And turn our character back on and move the copy. Just the pivot point's going to be way down here, so I can go to modify center pivot. And I am going to want the pivot point to be the center of the sphere and not the iris. So that's going to be something that I will want to deal with. So I will look at these guys in a side view. And again, we'll turn off the visibility of my character. And we'll see that pivot point is slightly off because it's factoring in the pivot point for the iris as well. So I'm going to hit D on my keyboard and just move that in a little bit because I want that to rotate on the pivot point of that sphere. And even though we can't see the other eye, I'm going to bring open my outliner. And let's see. Don't look like my move tool is going to show up for that one. That other one's in the way. That's okay. So I'll just delete that one. We have this one right. So I'm going to name this. This is going to be his left eye. As he's facing me, it's going to be the right eye. So I'm going to name that right left because it's his left eye. We'll jump back over here, turn our character back on, and go to Edit, Duplicate, move that over to Position, and just name that L or IR. And we will grab both of those and do Modify Freeze Transformations. So now as we rotate the eye, it rotates in place. So right now he looks a little cross-eyed just because he's a stylized character and his eyes aren't going to be always facing completely forward to be in the center of his eye. So I'm going to rotate one out a little bit. We'll go ahead and say 8 degrees on Y. And I want to keep in mind, remember that, and we'll say on R, we'll do -8 degrees. And that makes him look a little wall-eyed, I think. So let's try 7. So 7 degrees, -7 degrees. So this is one of those things that is fairly important. And he's still looking a little wall-eyed, I think. So we'll try 6. And -6. So I'm doing this on the group. I'm not doing it on the eye. Keep in mind. So that looks a little bit more like it should. So if I give this guy a render, he should look a little less creepy now because he has eyeballs and they're not just white. So yeah, obviously I go in and change the color of the eyes if I want. I can make them darker, which in this case I feel like I should you know, just for the sake of having a little bit more contrast, I should make them quite a bit more darker. But for the most part, that's how you make some fairly realistic eyes. And from here, you know, if I really get in here and zoom in to that eye and have a look at it, you know, it's going to look like a fairly semi-realistic eye. Now, as a bonus, what I'm going to show you is a little deformer that you can add to the eye to get it to kind of deform correctly as you're animating it. So what I want to do is I want to select my mesh and go to deform, and I'm going to choose a, let's see if I can remember which one I do want to choose. So I want to add a sculpt deformer. Now I'm going to get this little sphere down here that if I pull up, it's going to do some weird things. So the first thing I want to do to this sphere is make it a, and under mode, instead of stretch, I want to make it project. Then what you'll see if you move it close to the skin here, that it does this little projecting thing. It's a little strong at this point, but it's kind of what it does. So let me turn off the character real quick. I'm going to take this and we'll look at it from the side view. I'm going to try to line that up with my iris. And try to line it up from the front view. As well. So let me make sure that that works out well. So maybe bring it out a little bit, but anyway. And then I'll just take that guy and add it to, that's on the right eye. So I'm just going to add it to the right eye group. And if we unhide our character, now if I grab the right eye group and move that around, it's a little strong at this point, so we need to edit that a little bit. But if we go to our attribute editor, we want it to be positive displacement, I believe. No, negative displacement. We want it to be out a little bit. And we want to bring our drop-off distance way down, I think. Let's zero these out, just to be sure. It's positive. It's probably still a little bit high for the drop-off distance, but you can also look at our envelope. But that's one way to get it to where your eye kind of moves, or your eyelids sort of move with the eye. So anyway, that's modeling or texturing, creating a semi-realistic eye for your character.